So we're hearing from our viewers how there are no houses that they can find on the market. And the few that they do find, they have to pay way over asking, and then they're not even guaranteed the chance to win the property.
We've developed an amazing strategy that helped us buy hundreds of properties at foreclosure auction. And if you would like to know more about how you can do this too, take a second, hit subscribe, and check out the rest of this video. Nine times out of 10, if you go to a foreclosure auction, it's because the bank gets sick of waiting and waiting and waiting for the mortgage to get paid. And as a last resort, they try to force a sale so they can recapture as much of the mortgage that they lent as possible.
And many of these actually happen at the property.
Yeah, in fact, we go live and show you these things all the time right here on our channel.
First step is actually finding a foreclosure auction.
Everybody asks us that as one of their first questions. We do talk about that in our book. How do we do it?
So it depends on if it's a judicial or non-judicial, but typically it's hosted by an auctioneer, and often they have websites. And one of the old school ways to find it is an old newspaper.
Remember those newspapers? Who knew?
Exactly. And if you look in the legal section, they're required per law to actually post it for X amount of time prior to the auction. And you can look at that and you can figure out who's foreclosing on that property.
So there you go, mystery solved.
And I would have made millions if it hadn't been for you meddling kids.
That's how you can find foreclosures in your area.
So now, who's actually doing the foreclosure and why is that important?
Okay, well, like I said, 9 times out of 10 in our area, it seems that it's basically the bank that's doing the foreclosing. So picture this, somebody bought a property, they just never paid the mortgage, or they stopped paying the mortgage, and after a while, the bank says enough's enough, they put the property up for auction. But sometimes other things can happen.
For instance, there could be a second bank. So now there might be two banks, a first and a second mortgage. Which one's actually foreclosing? Because it's really important to know that, because if you happen to buy the second one, which happened after the first, then you owe the first mortgage. Or if there's a bunch of municipal liens, you also owe those, because those also are a priority lien.
Yeah, it's really important to learn more about this stuff. And again, that's why we dedicated a large chunk of our book to exactly that.
Right. So the next step for your due diligence is to call the tax assessor and the health department to figure out what's owed for taxes, as well as any liens on the property, such as trash or any code violations, as well as if it has a septic system, you want to know the age of that or when it was last inspected.
Yeah, we've done this a number of times and have been incredibly surprised by how much extra money was owed on the property. If we went to the auction and bid $100,000, we might find out all of a sudden that we're on the hook to pay $130,000.
Or it could be a massive water bill that's owed. I mean, we've seen that over $7,000 in one of those. Remember that?
Especially when a house is vacant and vacant for a really long time. Maybe there's a burst pipe or somebody had broken in and stolen the plumbing.
And the city always gets paid first, by the way.
That's right. You're not gonna get away with not paying City Hall.
So now it's the day of the auction, and we highly recommend you get to the property at least an hour beforehand, so you can kind of walk around the property, and if you're feeling a little...
Yeah, see if you can get a little advantage in terms of guessing and guesstimating what you're really going to be buying.
You might be able to kind of peek through the windows. If it's occupied, be careful, because that is trespassing.
Yeah, let's be careful about peeking through occupied properties' windows. You get the idea. These are mystery boxes. You don't get a private tour of the property. Heck, you don't even know going into it if the property's occupied or not, really.
Or if it has plumbing.
Right. So this is why it's great to scout out the property within legal reason as much as you can before the bidding starts.
Exactly. And so you can kind of gain a general idea of the condition of a property from the outside. For instance, we found many properties we bought with tons of trash outside. Now, if we see tons of trash outside, Kevin, can you help give me an idea of what you see that might be inside?
Listen, if they take such terrible care of the exterior of their property, I just know it's because they focus all their time and energy on keeping the inside spotless and completely up to date.
Now, what if you also see those little stickers that say winterized on the front door? What does that tell you?
It guarantees that they totally got it winterized way before the plumbing exploded. Turn it off!
So those stickers are usually put on by a service company for the bank, generally verifying that it's vacant, unless, of course, someone's squatting in there.
There's people here? Squatters!
That's a whole nother
Sure.
story. And they've, like Kevin said, winterized the property. I've yet to come up against one that is actually properly winterized by
Yeah.
blowing the lines.
Yeah. So if you see that it's been winterized, don't assume that the plumbing is fully intact and they winterized it before there's a problem. In fact, in our experience, that almost never happens. And if the outside of the property looks really run down, really trashy, you can pretty much bet the inside looks similar.
So the next step is you want to find similar houses, what they've sold renovated in your area, to come up with what's called an ARV, or after repair value. I like to use the MLS, and if you can have access to that, you can see other comps or other similar sales in the area. And once again, the key is looking for things that were fully renovated to get that max ARV.
Right. So if you either have access to MLS or have a friend or a relative or somebody that does, they can help you with that. But if you don't, you can use something as basic as Zillow. And everybody knows Zillow. You can go on there and look at sold properties in the immediate area that are similar or comparable to this property that you're focusing on. Again, remember, sold properties that have been recently renovated, and come up with an idea of how much they went for on average, and that would be your after repair value.
Now, we're not going to go over full how to actually comp property out, but you're generally looking for similar size, bedroom count, bathroom count, style of home, and age of home. Those are the general key factors to consider.
Yeah, pretty straightforward. Apples to apples comparisons.
So now you want to figure out what your maximum allowable bid number is, and that's where you kind of work backwards. You start off with your ARV and then subtract your rehab, any liens that are owed, closing costs, profit margin, all that, so you can come up with a bid number that you're comfortable with to make enough profit that you're happy at the end of the day.
Exactly. Now, let's talk about the rehab costs. How are you going to calculate that amount of money?
Rehab budget. How much is this going to cost to get you to that ARV?
Yeah, and remember, we're estimating here because you really don't know exactly what's going on inside that house.
So it's best to overestimate to protect yourself.
Right. Always be conservative when you're dealing with these kind of numbers.
So you want to look at first the big stuff, the roof, the siding, the windows, the foundation. Then of course you're going to assume certain things for the heating system. If you see pipes coming out that denote that it might be a high efficient, then you know that the system's been probably turned in the last 10 years. You want to look at also, most likely if it's dated on the outside, it's probably going to be dated on the inside. So you're probably going to have it update the kitchen, the bathrooms, maybe flooring, and then of course generally paint and stuff like that.
You want to watch out for a couple of other major red flags that he didn't get to, which could be things like an underground storage oil tank.
Yes.
That could be an absolute deal breaker and a career ender if you don't know what you're doing.
So that's really important. Yes, he's right. Look at pipes on the outside of the property. If they're going into the foundation, more likely than not, it's the oil tank's inside. But if it's maybe a couple of feet away from the property, you're looking at more likely than not an underground oil tank, which could cost quite a bit of money if you have to renovate that and bring in a remediation team.
Right, so there you go. Now you know a little bit more about how to get your rehab expenses figured out. What do we do next?
So next, now that you have all your due diligence done, you want to come up with what's called your maximum allowable bid. So how do we come up with that, Kev?
Well, you start with the ARV that we've established, and then you start backing out some of the other things we've talked about. Your rehab budget, your municipal fees, taxes owed, or any other priority things ahead of that, as well as holding costs and expenses.
And of course, you want to figure out some kind of profit margin too, right, Kev?
Kind of the whole reason we do this. I get that.
So we're back outside of the property, on the street, right where the auction's going to happen. What's next, Kev?
Well, we're going to be registering to bid by bringing our bank check, and different auctioneers and different companies are going to have different amounts, so you need to know that ahead of time. And you're going to register to bid with that check. The reason they do this is to make sure that just nobody without any real funds is just going to put in ludicrous bids on an auction property. And then you get to join in the bidding.
Now, it depends on the auctioneer. There's different types of auctioneers that might start the bid with their number, or they will request a bid from the audience. There's also things called range bids, where the auctioneer might have a number that they start off with, but their real number is a little bit higher. And so that, you won't actually, until you hit that number, possibly win it.
Right. And of course, the auctioneer isn't bidding themselves. It's the bank that is giving them a number of how little they'll take. Think of it like a eBay reserve bid.
There you go. That's a good idea.
Some idea of how that process works. The bank will almost always have some type of minimum bid to start the bidding.
So great news. You won the auction, and now you're going to be signing the memorandum of sale. But the other thing you really need to know is you're going to have to typically close in about 30 days.
Yeah, closing happens pretty quick. And most of our followers ask us, do I need to bring all the money to the auction? You don't. You just need the deposit check, but you're going to need to come up with the rest of that money pretty darn quick shortly after the auction.
Some people work with hard money lenders or private lenders.
You can't use a regular bank in a conventional loan.
Correct. Typically, you're not going to get access like we talked about before, where a bank's going to want to do an appraisal. They're going to walk through the property, kind of maybe turn on the utilities, make sure things work.
Yeah.
Well, not doing that.
They're probably not going to work. So you're not going to get a conventional loan closed fast enough to purchase it. So you need to have, like he said, hard money or private loans or your own
partnership. Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so you've won the auction. You've closed with your financing. What are you going to do next to be successful?
Well, if you want to be successful in investing properties like this one, you need to go buy the book.
And then buy the book.
If you want to know what to do next with your investment property, make sure you like and comment for our ideas.